Let's start off with the discovery of an illegal Chinese biolab here in California. Here is the story from Zero Hedge. Let's get into it. It says, I've never seen anything like this. Mysterious Chinese biolab discovered in remote California city. Why would a biolab run by a shady Chinese company be operating in Reedley, California in the central San Joaquin Valley? So this biolab was discovered in Reedley, California, which is around the Fresno, California area. And it turns out that this company the way they discovered it was that an official noticed that there was this hose coming out of this warehouse building, just like a hole was carved into the wall and somebody stuck a hose through the wall. And that is clearly not to code. And so they thought something's weird. And this inspector was looking around and noticed a really odd smell and saw this hose coming out of the building and decided to do a bit of investigation, knocked on the door. Some people answered the door, Chinese people answered the door and said that they were from China, said that their boss was not around, that their boss was from China. And this person that was doing the investigation or inspection noticed that they had that it was clearly some sort of a lab inside. They ended up going in to the place and they found like 900 rats or mice. They ended up having to euthanize a bunch of them. They found a bunch of different materials, hazardous materials. They had blood, tissue samples, various different chemicals. They found all kinds of different other hazardous kind of infectious agents, including COVID, HIV, hepatitis, and herpes. This was all discovered really early on. This was actually discovered, I believe, in December. Last December it was discovered. And then they had been updating the public a little bit here and there, really keeping it very hush. And there's a big conspiracy theory around this. And so we're going to break this down a little bit because a couple of the theories were, for one, why did they discover this so long ago? And yet just now the facts are starting to leak out to the public, or not leak out, but the departments are, the public departments, the officials are starting to now release some information. Why did it take so long for this information to be released to the public about this Chinese-owned biolab found in California? The second question was, why did Gavin Newsom's administration grant this biolab $360,000 in tax credits? So there's that question. Why were they given any money? Lastly, when county officials were given directives on how to answer questions by the public, they were sent an email, and the email basically directed them to say nothing, to say not much, basically to say this is an ongoing investigation and can't really comment on that. So those three things have led people to wonder, what is really going on with this biolab? Is there some sort of a cover-up happening? Was this biolab discovered to have more, really bad things going on inside of the biolab and they're covering up for that? What is it? Well, looking at this story a little bit more, first of all, the emails to the county officials is pretty standard. It is there is an investigation going on into this lab. And because of the ongoing investigation, it is pretty standard to say, don't comment on ongoing investigations. Just say it's an ongoing investigation, and we're going to let the investigation do what the investigation is supposed to do. And if there's anything important to let you know, we'll let you know. That's fine if and only if they really have not found anything dangerous to the public. If there was something dangerous to the public found in this lab, if it was truly found to have something that could have, like escape. I mean, obviously, if they're testing for COVID, that's something they probably should be disclosing to the public to let them know if there's maybe a possibility of some sort of escape of something. They should let the public know about this. If they do have infectious diseases that could come out from that lab, they should probably let the public know. So there are certain things they probably should inform the public of. But if they have not found those things, or if those things have been destroyed, then it is fair for them to do an investigation and allow the investigation to properly unfold. Because if you were under investigation and you were, let's say, innocent, then you'd want that same courtesy. You'd want them to just not comment to the public and cause hysteria over something you may not have done. You'd want them to just do the investigation. But that is only if they have not found anything truly dangerous in this. And a lot of us just don't have any faith that they would be honest about that. I mean, clearly, we all lived through the pandemic. We're living through currently the lab leak theory in Wuhan, China. And we know that they're not exactly honest when it comes to this type of stuff. So that makes people very, very nervous. The $360,000 tax credit that was given to this company, they applied for it, they were given it, but it turns out they did not meet the requirements in the end. And so they ended up not qualifying for it. So it was something that they had hoped to get. They ended up not qualifying for, and there's no real there when it comes to that $360,000 money, state money that they're supposed to be getting. The other issue is I mentioned that there were three that people were kind of nervous about, but the fact that this hasn't been released to us, we don't have any of the information. This was discovered in December, and they're just now kind of getting that information out there. And again, it's because they were conducting these investigations and keeping things hush. I think a big public discussion around this should be whether or not they should be keeping, which types of investigations and which information should they be keeping from the public when it comes to things like this. But they're claiming, well, we didn't want to cause public alarm because of the current situation and the current climate, political climate. We didn't want to cause alarm, and so whatever. Let me just read a little bit more of this. It's interesting what may or may not have been going on in this lab, and I've got my suspicions. And the reason I have my suspicions is because, actually, let me jump to this other article. This is from the Fresno Bee. Now, this lab was found just outside of Fresno, and this is actually the third place that this lab ended up. This lab had moved. It started off in Tulare, then it landed and then it was there from 2015 to 2018. Then it moved to Fresno. They shut down in Tulare. Then they operated in Fresno from 2018 to 2022. And then it was shut down in Fresno. And then they operated in now Reedley, which is just outside of Fresno. And now they're shut down again. But this article from the Fresno Bee that was released last week, Chinese-owned lab was in Tulare before Fresno, then Reedley. What happened inside? Now, let me read some of this article to you because it is just insane. Nina Salazar was happy to have a job when she worked for 3 years at a Chinese-owned laboratory in Tulare that made disease and drug test kits. So that's what they're claiming to be making, is disease and drug testing kits. And so that's why they had these various different diseases in the lab, because that's what they were making testing kits for, those diseases, they claim, including COVID and HIV and hepatitis and whatnot. And so, that's what they're claiming. Now, why do they have this hose sticking out of the building? Why are they not going through the proper permitting and having a properly run looking lab? I mean, it was like a dingy looking lab. Everything looked really sketch. Why is that? Why wouldn't you actually operate a better looking lab? Well, this article goes on to say the same lab that was shut down in Reedley after COVID-19 and more than 20 infectious agents were found in refrigerators in the ramshackle facility that was operating without proper permits. So this is the job Nina Salazar got. For 3 years, she worked for this lab. So Salazar, who lives in Visalia, told the Fresno Bee that she was a lab tech for the Universal Meditech, Inc., and at its location in Tulare from 2015 to 2018. During that time, she and about 15 other employees assembled pregnancy, diabetes, and drug test kits, she said. I was so excited because I had a job. I felt important because we got to wear lab coats and stuff. She said, but there was something that seemed odd and shady about the place. There were occasional problems with paychecks. And when managers would come to do visits for investors, they would have to get people from outside to come in and work on the production line to make the laboratory seem more economically viable, she said. Then there were the chemicals that Salazar and coworkers handled but were never identified to them. She says, quote, we had to make this purple liquid for tests. We had to mix the chemicals. We had to cook it, she said. They only told us that it had to be a special fluid perfectly made for the test strips, but they never told us what the chemicals were. They spoke Chinese a lot, so we didn't know what they were saying. She said not knowing what the chemicals were was concerning, you think? So I'm sitting here thinking, well, what were they cooking? This shady laboratory that's all sketched out, and they're saying mix these chemicals, cook them up. I mean, it does seem like maybe there was something else going on. Maybe the lab was a cover for another type of lab operation, right? Maybe drugs, fentanyl. I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing. Everybody's guessing when it comes to this lab that was found. There's, of course, the line of thinking is, was this some sort of bioweapons laboratory? Did China come over here with these Chinese nationals, and they set up this business, and they're here to harm Americans? They're here to make weapons or release viruses here in the United States that are going to harm Americans. Of course, that is one line of thinking. That is not as likely as the other line of thinking is. Well, I mean, the one line of thinking is that this is just a legitimate lab that legitimately was trying to make testing kits, and they didn't need things to be fancy in their lab. It could look like a rundown shack of a laboratory, whatever, as long as it got the job done, and they were doing the best they could to start up a business. And they just didn't understand the permitting. California is a difficult state to operate in business-wise. I can tell you that. There's just a lot more hoops to jump through for California that maybe you wouldn't be familiar with or used to, the bureaucracy here. So you might not file for all the permits that you're supposed to file for because there's an endless mountain of them. Or you might not do all the inspections you're supposed to have because you don't realize that there's, again, an endless mountain of them here in California. I mean, there's a possibility that this business was legitimately trying to operate an actual lab, disease testing lab. But there's also the possibility that this was a cover for a different type of business, maybe drugs, maybe making of drugs or some other sort of money laundering of some kind. I don't know. I mean, but this definitely freaks people out. There's no doubt about that this laboratory being found in California, run by Chinese nationals, although that's, what if it were found by other nationals and not Chinese people? If it was found by German nationals or British nationals or Australian nationals, I mean, how would people feel about that? Would they feel differently? And so whenever we see stories like this, we have to sort of insert different players and think of things a little bit differently in order to assess, are we just having like a level of hysteria around this that we shouldn't really, that's kind of unwarranted or not necessary. But this company, it started off as a company called Prestige Biotech. It ended up, that one went under, oh no, sorry, I think it was first Universal Meditech, and then it became Prestige Biotech after Universal Meditech went under. And they've moved around a bit. They said that a city code enforcement officer responded to an anonymous tip last December about an unlicensed business operating in an old cold storage warehouse. That led to the discovery of dozens of freezers and refrigerators full of vials of blood, serum, and tissue samples, cartons and containers of various chemicals, stored medical lab equipment, and hundreds of lab mice that were in such distress and neglect that they ultimately had to be euthanized. Those revelations resulted in the shutdown of the Reedley operation in March and subsequent months of clearing the warehouse of a host of biological agents, chemicals, and more. A cleanup and abatement process that is expected to continue into October. So they're still cleaning out this lab, still testing everything, still going through all the precautions. And apparently they've said that they have not found anything too terrible. So says that Universal Meditech operated first in Tulare from 2015 to 2018, then Fresno from 2018 to 2022. Then it moved its operations to Reedley. There, the company moved into a leased warehouse on I Street, never bothering to get a city business license or obtain permits for electrical wiring and other building modifications. Again, if you're starting up a business and you're not familiar with California, you might not realize that you need to get all these different various permits that maybe you don't need if you're operating somewhere else. I don't know how people do business. I mean, it's hard enough for me. Technically I have a business being run here in California. It's hard enough for me even to keep up with all the codes. I couldn't imagine what it's like if you're operating like food, alcohol, or laboratory testing. Not making excuses for them, but just saying it's very difficult. And so maybe I think what's more concerning than them not getting the permits is the fact that they just had this really sketchy warehouse with the hose sticking out. What was the hose for? That's what I want to know. Were they dumping crap outside, literally, or were they pumping water in? I mean, what was it they were doing with that hose? So this is what's going on with this. Now, Kevin McCarthy, he's obviously Speaker of the House. He traveled here to California. He's a representative from Bakersfield. So he opened up a new office for a new congressional office, and he gave, this is really concerning. It's concerning that, mentioned his concern. Other members of Congress are mentioning their concern. So there's definitely a heightened alert around this laboratory, wondering if there's some sort of real nefarious activity from China, and if they are operating this lab here in the United States, doing bad things, trying to infect us, trying to, release viruses into our air or whatever. So there's a lot of that, a lot of those questions. I think, do we have video of the lab? Did we already play that, or was that somebody talking in that, or no? Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and play that. Let's watch and see what they say.
Site. These long lines of refrigerators and freezers. These are freezers along the side here. Down this side is where we had the -80 freezers. Those were a particular concern to us. -80 freezers are really there to really keep certain infectious agents in that type of a state, so they're not infecting other areas when they're actually exposed to the environment. So we were definitely concerned about those -80s, but all these materials here, these refrigerators and freezers were full. Here's what we saw. This is one of the freezers there, what we saw in there as well. Some more blood sample, tissues, serum. There is just so much material. Here's some more photos of that. Again, what you saw in the city of Fresno, you're seeing those boxes. This is some ethanol here. You're seeing chemicals throughout the site. I wanted to share these photos because look how tightly compacted this is. When we first, and I'll get to this here a little bit later, all we could categorize is what we could see. But as we started moving the boxes with City of Greeley, we're finding more and more as we go through this site here. The refrigerator freezers, as you can see, all this was wrapped up. This was items that we saw at City of Fresno that are now over at the Reedley site.
Now, so most of the bodily fluids that they discovered, like the blood and the urine and tissue samples, that was from people taking the test. So the blood samples were from people that had given the blood for the test, or they had peed on the pregnancy test, things like that. So it wasn't like they were storing necessarily urine and blood. The samples that they had discovered were from people taking these tests, and this lab was apparently supposed to be processing these tests. Now, look, I'm sure most likely this was a lab actually trying to test for these diseases and thinking that they could make a bunch of money off of this industry and could do it well under code. And I think maybe people are freaking out because it's more than anything because it's Chinese owned and it didn't have the proper permitting or the proper infrastructure, and that is now freaking people out. But just interesting story. We'll definitely continue to follow it. They've been, they've been going after this lab since December. They're still clearing it out. So if there's anything that's really been found, and if it ends up being something more than just a really piss poor run, no pun intended, a piss poor run lab, we will definitely let you know for sure. We'll keep you updated on that. But that is the latest on that illegal Chinese Biolab that was discovered in California. So make of it what you will. Love to hear from you. If you think that it was something else going on, you want to point that out, email me, kim@kimiversen.com. All right, let me tell you guys about these amazing sheets that I've been sleeping on. I absolutely love them. They are called Cozy Earth, and I heard about these first when they were, you're going to think that I'm super cheesy, but this was one of Oprah's favorite things. And, I do think Oprah has a lot of really good favorite things. And so Cozy Earth was one of hers, and I thought, okay. They are expensive. And so it's a bit of you see the price and you're thinking, I don't want to spend that much on sheets. But then I slept on them, and more so wash them. The more you wash them, the softer they get. And they really are the best sheets I've ever slept on in my life. I'm not going to lie. They really, really are. So try them out. Just swap out your current sheets for soft, breathable, temperature-regulating sheets from Cozy Earth. And if you don't agree that they aren't the best sheets you've ever slept on, if you're not sleeping cooler like I do, if you're not sleeping more comfortably on these sheets. They will refund your purchase price plus shipping, no questions asked, and you get 100 nights to try them out. 100 nights, no questions asked if you don't like them, but you will like them and you will keep them. And then they're great. So they're made out of viscose from bamboo. It traps less heat, which is really great. So this helps you sleep cooler and more comfortably year round. And that is really nice because if you're like turning down the air at night to a really low level because you want to sleep comfortably and cooler, and your electrical bill is going through the roof, then just swap out your sheets and you will save money on that alone because you won't need to turn the temperature so low if you're a hot sleeper like myself. So that's why, for me, Cozy Earth has been amazing because I don't have to sleep in such chilly temperatures. I can get away with it. Now, you can save up to 40%. Like I said, these are not cheap sheets. These are really nice, luxurious sheets, and but you could get 40% off on them. You could go to cozyearth.com, enter Iversen at checkout, and you can save up to 40%. So again, try them for 100 nights. If you don't sleep cooler, send them back for a full refund. That is cozyearth.com, promo code Iversen.